Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to Rancher's September online meetup. My name's Tom Callway. I'm the Global Director of Product Marketing. And I'm your host. This is, I think, a particularly special meetup this month because it's about, I think, what is probably one of the hottest technologies in the Kubernetes ecosystem right now, K3s. There's been some news about it very recently, and its acceptance in CNCF, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a second. So hopefully you're going to enjoy the next hour or so, depending on how long we take. I'm here, that's me on the left. I'm based in West London in the UK. I do have a cold, which I think I've picked up from my children going back to school. So apologies if I'm sounding a bit croaky. I'm joined by my friend and colleague Craig Gillick, who is Director of Engineering based in Arizona. Also somebody you'll probably recognize, Bill Maxwell, who often does these meetups. He's also going to be part of the team today. He's based in Arizona too. And then a very special welcome to my mate Hussein, who senior software engineer based in Alexandria in Egypt. And he's going to be manning the questions that we encourage you to ask throughout the presentation. So I'm going to do the sort of, the housekeeping, the sort of shameless plugging of various things that are coming up. I'll try and whiz through that really quickly so we can hand over to Craig and to Bill, and we can get cracking on the demo, which is probably the thing you're most interested in. So bear with me. So first things first, and for those of you who have been on one of these meetups before, you'll probably recognize this slide. This is a meetup, not a webinar. Really, really important. We need to set expectations. It's kind of informal. It's very rancher. This isn't a slick, 30-minute presentation by a sales director. This is dudes talking about stuff that they love, that they've been working on, and things take time sometimes. Sometimes we overrun, and sometimes things break. Demos, the demo gods are occasionally they're good to us, but often they're not. If things do break, if you're disconnected or if we disconnect or something, whatever, be patient, we'll be back. Again, questions. Ask lots of questions. It's a meetup, so we want your feedback on how things are going, your own experiences, and we will try and answer as many questions as we possibly can. If you're on social media, then by all means use the hashtag Rancher Meetup and do us a picture. We always like retweeting things like that. People do it, so you're encouraged to participate. Also, if you haven't joined our Slack community, you're encouraged to do that too. And particularly if you're just a user of the product, you're not a customer, it really is the place to get help from other experts in the field and sort of fellow members of the community. It's entirely free. You won't get spammed with anything if you join it. It's there for you, and it's hugely popular. It says 16,000 or so users. It's probably far more than that. This is a fairly old slide. Right, so that's the housekeeping. Agenda. So I'm going to give a quick company update, couple of slides. Then, as we always do, what is Rancher for those who are not sort of initiated into Rancher and its sort of unique position in the marketplace. I'll give a quick sort of spin around that. Again, I won't be spending a lot of time on that because it's probably not why you came onto this online meetup. Then I'll hand over to Craig, and maybe Bill will chip in as well. They'll talk about the latest developments in the K3s space and also the all-important demo. And then there'll be the Q&A at the end. I'll stress again, lots of questions. If there's a particularly good or pertinent question that sort of fits in with the flow of the presentation, of course, we'll stop and we'll ask it and answer it. So, company update. Just gonna take a quick swig of the water. So, if you don't know that much about Rancher Labs, the company behind Rancher. We've been around for 4 or 5 years. We've got lots of very strong partners, as you would probably expect, and lots and lots of users. I mean, we often talk about 100 million downloads. It's a big number. I'm sure it's much more than that. The really key one for me, from an ecosystem and community perspective, is the 35,000 plus active deployments. That's, you know, that footprint. Yes, many of them don't spend money with us, but that's not really the point. You know, we've chosen this particular technology paradigm, open source, so that people can get value from the stuff that we do, and we're super excited by the fact that so many people are benefiting from Rancher, even though they don't pay us any money, and that's way in excess of any other Kubernetes management platform vendor. And of course, we've got plenty of customers and some very recognizable logos up there, which I'm sure you'll see. The one that I want to draw your attention to is the next is Forrester Wave. If you've not come across this, I think it's probably the most important report in this industry. It comes out every 2 years. We've just had, in fact, yesterday, the latest Forrester New Wave report land. This is a picture of the outcomes. You can see here that the further you are to the top right-hand corner, it's a bit like Gartner, I suppose, like that. But the further you are to the top right-hand corner, the better job you're doing, I suppose. And of course, we've got, you know, usual suspects. Red Hat, Google has come from really nowhere. They weren't even included in the last report to be a leader, which is great with their Anthos product. VMware, which wasn't in this market 2 years ago, but you know, reacquired Pivotal and then came out with Tanzu. They're kind of sitting on the cusp. What's worth noting, I suppose, is that you know, these are megacorps, huge companies doing all sorts of different things with thousands and thousands of people, and then there's Rancher that has persistently been in this top right-hand leader quadrant. We're very, very proud of that. So this report was published yesterday. We've bought rights to it, so you can go up onto our website. I think it's actually the first CTA on the homepage of the Rancher website, or I've created a bit.ly link here as well, which you can go to. Forrester-new-wave-2020, and you can tell us who you are, and then you can download the report. It's really ultra cool. We're very, very proud of that. Also, something that you may have heard about is the fact that Rancher is actually in the process of being acquired by a company that I'm sure you've heard of, which is SUSE. This was announced on July the 8th. I don't have a huge amount to tell you about it, because honestly, I'm just not, you know, that close to it. I'm just cracking on with what I do. But we expect the acquisition to close this autumn, or if you're from America, in the fall. Right, so that's the company update. What is Rancher? And I promise I won't take very long. I'll try and do this in, let's say, 3 minutes. Right, so this is Rancher's recipe for production quality Kubernetes at scale and anywhere. It's made up of 2 major components. The first one is the certified Kubernetes distribution. This is something that we, as a multi-cluster, traditionally a multi-cluster Kubernetes management platform, have been very keen on popularizing. Is the fact that rather than try to lock customers in saying you must use our Kubernetes distribution, it's the best Kubernetes distribution, we recognize that Kubernetes is increasingly commoditized. We've currently got 2 distributions of our own. We're about to introduce a third, and we support or try to support and do a very good job of that, of providing a sort of consistent management experience for whatever certified Kubernetes distribution you've chosen for your particular use case, whether it's on-prem, whether it's at the edge, whether it's on your laptop, or whether it's hosted in the cloud. So I've got RKE here, which is the Rancher's sort of on-prem distribution. K3s, which we're going to be talking about in more detail on the right-hand side, and then we've always treated the sort of preeminent or the prominent cloud-hosted Kubernetes distributions as first-class citizens. We're seeing some very cool enhancements with our EKS support coming up in the next release, but that's something that's been very much part of our DNA, and frankly, it's good to see that other vendors are following the path that we've beaten as far as multi-cluster, multi-distribution support is concerned. Rancher, as a Kubernetes management platform, sits on top of that, providing primarily simplify cluster operations and easy cluster management, whether it's provisioning clusters or container storage or observability or whatever. And sitting on top of that, we have the very, very important security authentication and policy enforcement. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people come to Rancher initially. We've got this great hooks into Active Directory, OpenLDAP, Okta, whatever it is you're using, and a fantastic RBAC model, which gives you granular control on how to access the different clusters. And then sitting on top of that, and this is really all about adoption, it's about integrating tools that you guys are already using, making them really easy to consume within Rancher, whether it's persistent storage or whether it's monitoring tools or application packaging or Istio service mesh or whatever. We really just make it very, very easy for you to consume those tools within the Rancher experience. Now, of course, it's open source, it's free software. There's only one version. You can go up to GitHub and download it. There's no sort of tiered subscription model that unlocks stuff as you pay us more money. There's nothing like that. Anybody can use it. If you need to pay for it, I should say, rather than want to, I think needing to pay for it. If you're using it at any scale, it's probably sensible that you speak to us about our subscription services, made up of 3 things. Perhaps most importantly, it's a 24/7 break-fix support. But there's onboarding, which gets you up and running as quickly as possible. It's a very structured, phased approach to helping people onboard Rancher. And if you need that additional expert help, we have a significant and large consulting team that operates globally, mostly remotely now. But of course, when in normal times, they would also be on site. But it's not just Rancher that we're supporting with that subscription. Rancher, is made up of a number of different technologies, which we provide an SLA for, and you can see those included in the first column here under Rancher SLA, whether it's Helm or Grafana, Prometheus or whatever. All of those technologies are covered by our subscription SLA. We also support a huge sort of catalog of certified applications that are available from within Rancher, and you can see them on the right-hand side here. This is just a snapshot. It's by no means comprehensive. We don't force you into using a particular operating system. For example, you can use Ubuntu if that's your thing, or SUSE or Red Hat, or even Debian or one of the more sort of community-orientated Linux distributions. And the same goes for storage. Yes, we started the long haul project, but we've given that to the CNCF, and it's theirs to run now. But we also have great relationships with the guys at Portworx and OpenEBS and Storage OS, and encourage you to use their fantastic technologies. So I won't labor this, but it's important to stress that when you get a support contract from Rancher, it's not just Rancher itself, but it's the constituents that make up the different layers of the stack that Rancher covers. Right, so this is a sort of semi-shameless plug, I suppose. Ongoing learning. If you've downloaded Rancher and you want to sort of get tips and tricks and so forth, the very best place to go is obviously YouTube, as it is with pretty much everything these days. We have Rancher TV on YouTube. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of videos up there. I do encourage you to use those. We also have free trainings, and we have master classes which are scheduled very regularly. And I would also give a particular plug to my colleague and friend Adrian Goins, who's got a fantastic YouTube channel, and he's been running it for several years. And there are all sorts of Rancher and Kubernetes related videos up there, which he's very, very slick video editing, and he's pretty well known within the community. And it's if you haven't seen his stuff, go and check it out. Adrian's also started this, and this is a shameless plug because I think it's great. The only other Kubernetes related sort of news source that I sort of actively promote to people is the Google's Kubernetes podcast, which I think is brilliant, but only comes out like once a month, or is it once a week? I can't remember, but fairly irregularly. Adrian does this every weekday. It happens in the morning, East Coast time. He is masterful delivery. If you've ever met him or seen his stuff, he scours the ecosystem for stories the night before. He curates them and then delivers them in it's like a half an hour, 45 minutes every morning. Regular giveaways and prizes. it's a really good vibe. It's in my diary. I try and be on it as much as I possibly can. Find them on the live stream on YouTube, or you can go to adrian.goins.com to look at the recordings. Another shameless plug for something that Adrian's also involved in is the Rancher Academy. It's free certification. It's fantastic. Great. It's great content. We've had literally thousands of people sign up to it. Probably 1,000 people who have actually completed the course. Highly valued. Nothing but great feedback. Go check it out if you haven't already seen it. It's academy.rancher.com. And then lastly, before I hand over to Craig, is the edgeconference.io. So this is a Rancher, again, is hosting this, but we're doing it with partners. It's happening next month on the 21st. We're doing call for papers. The deadline is actually this Friday. So if you don't know anything about the conference, the first time you've heard about it, go to edgeconference.io, check out the website, submit a talk. Deadline's this Friday. Can't wait to see you there. If you're interested in Kubernetes generally, more specifically using Kubernetes at the edge, and particularly interested in K3s, this is for you. Of course, it's virtual, like everything these days, and it's also free. So with that, we've got through that content. It's taken me 15 minutes. Apologies if I've taken too long. I'm going to hand over to Craig. Craig, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Right.
Thank you. So what we wanted to talk about today was, of course, K3s joining the CNCF as a sandbox project. And then after we talk about that, we wanted to give a demo of some of the things landing in K3s 1.19. So if you keep up with K3s at all, you've probably seen this news. Over the summer, we worked pretty hard to get K3s submitted to the CNCF. There was a vote, and we were accepted. So we're very ecstatic about that. It means K3s grows beyond just Rancher. The goal, of course, is to make the project truly vendor neutral. We, as the maintainers of K3s right now, really want nothing more than to see, other maintainers from other companies, or even independent. And we already have a really strong community. That's really what has made K3s successful, is the community around it. But for the most part, the code writers and maintainers have been largely Rancher employees, with a few exceptions of folks who have really taken it on of their own accord to get the features or the enhancements or bug fixes in there. But we get this vendor neutral home, and we feel that we can really grow K3s's user base and contributor base as well. I wanted to hit on sort of what this means for the project, so that folks who are concerned or worried, or not necessarily concerned or worried, but just kind of curious about what this actually means. I wanted to hit on sort of the more tactical things in that area. First and foremost, it means the code and release artifacts are going to move out of sort of Rancher organizations and into neutral organizations. So right now the code base is at github.com/rancher/K3s. That will be migrated over the next 1 or 2 weeks to github.com/K3s-io/K3s. You don't need to memorize that. It'll redirect and everything. But basically, there'll be a separate org in GitHub for K3s. Same thing with Docker Hub. If you pull down any of the images related to K3s, they're coming from the Rancher repo. Those again will go to sort of a vendor neutral repository. And then other assets, like the domain, sort of those kind of more legal related assets are being transferred as well. Beyond sort of that sort of technical artifact, there's a number of other changes as well. I think the biggest one is you will be moving towards adopting open governance model. This is one of the things I'm actually most excited about. So we've been, Ranchers at its core has done everything open source since day one. But we develop in the open, the code's there on GitHub, all Apache 2 license, but we haven't necessarily really taken it to the next level with having a project that has contributors from multiple organizations and everything. And so I feel if we can, with CNCF's help, we can really move the ball forward for K3s and establish really good open governance to make it easy for people who want to contribute. We've already learned a ton in this space, just looking at some of the other examples out there, like Containerd or Prometheus, and how they handle open governance, and of course Kubernetes. It's been a great bit of learning for us already. Another thing that'll be changing is just some of the community aspects, and sort of, from the most fundamental concrete standpoint, the K3s Slack channel will migrate out of the Rancher organization and into the CNCF Slack organization. Same goal there, just getting things vendor neutral. And then the other big thing, this isn't necessarily a written requirement of being a sandbox project in the CNCF, but it's sort of our goal, is to get more in line and aligned with the upstream projects we use. So I think sort of, the biggest piece of feedback around K3s and its relation to Kubernetes, one of the biggest pieces is, how does it relate to Kubernetes? Are there things in K3s that should be in upstream Kubernetes? And, we kind of see this as an area that we can definitely grow and improve. And so one of our, fundamental goals with this is to kind of reduce that patch set that K3s carries, either by eliminating them because, Kubernetes we might have been ahead of the curve with experimenting with something. Now Kubernetes has implemented the same thing that we had a patch for. So we can eliminate patches that way. We can find ways to contribute back upstream patches that make sense. And then just generally seek to align as best we can. I think we already do a pretty decent job of working, in the community. Just yesterday, Hussein, who's on this call, got a PR merge to upstream etcd for a bug we found while testing our embedded etcd that I'm going to demo today. Another one of our engineers, Jacob, he's been working super hard on getting SE Linux working in Containerd. That's actually been a group effort with Jacob and Darren, I Build the Cloud, and another engineer, Eric. They've all spent a ton of time on getting SE Linux working on Containerd and contributing that upstream. And of course, Michael Crosby actually was the one who got it across the finish line. He's a Containerd committer. So really excited to get well aligned with upstream as part of this move. If anyone's curious, you can follow along. There's a GitHub issue in the CNCF TOC repo. And there's also a GitHub issue in Rancher/K3s. So that's kind of these are sort of checklists, that we're checking off as we make the move. So we could possibly post the link somewhere after this, or you can find it, I think, in our Slack channel afterwards. I want to take a quick pause here to see if there's any questions or comments about the move to the CNCF, anything we can answer in this regard. All right. Bill or Tom, you didn't see anything worth in the CNCF realm, right?
Not in the CNCF realm right now.
Okay.
We can talk more.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So those were the main things I wanted to hit on with the move. Like I said, I think the biggest sort of, we've already started on, I want to touch on sort of the progress we've made. We've already started on a lot of the legal and clerical stuff, transferring the domain over, making sure copyrights and trademarks are taken care of appropriately, and a handful of other things. We've been working with the folks at CNCF on that. On the sort of code/community side, we've been making incremental improvements, just, kind of baby steps in improving that developer and community experience. We've beefed up our contributing guidelines. So there's a little, so that you hopefully have, if you want to contribute to K3s, it's a bit more clear on how to do that and the process we follow. Still some work to go there. We've published a roadmap about, it's in our GitHub repo, but we published a roadmap of sort of the next set of expected features. And we've also, established a code of conduct and a developer certificate of origin, just to sort of formalize the interactions between contributors to K3s. Next up is that all-important transferring of the GitHub repos and moving the Docker images out of the Rancher repo, and then figuring out governance. We don't want to just jump into that and pick a governing model randomly. We really want to think through what works for us and what works for the community. So yeah, that is sort of the donation to the CNCF in a nutshell. We're very excited about it, and I think we're really happy to be part of it.
Hey, Craig. So we have a question from Jay D'Angelo saying we were getting ready to launch ROS, Rancher OS for a standard with both AWS and vSphere for Kubernetes deployments when K3s overtook it. Is that correct? And if so, what is the commitment with K3s over a SUSE variant in the foreseeable future that we may want to align to?
Right. So there's a couple things, just to clarify that question, a couple things that are conflated. So Rancher OS is an operating system, and K3s is not. You can deploy it on any modern Linux operating system. There is K3OS, which is an operating system as well. Now, I wouldn't even say that is sort of our experimental next gen operating system designed explicitly to launch and manage K3s nodes and clusters. It's almost unfair to say it's overtaken Rancher OS because it's not at feature parity and it's still experimental. So Rancher OS has been hardened in production. K3OS is a project, not a product for Rancher. And as we continue to experiment in the operating system place, I don't see it going GA or becoming an officially supported project in the short term. We like the operating system space, and we really believe in that sort of the core of what Rancher OS was getting at, which is a immutable operating system that you just overlay containers onto, right? That is sort of, I think, our guiding principle with operating systems. I think the world and the industry has moved beyond Rancher OS because it was very, 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 Docker centric, and now we have, many different container runtimes, and Kubernetes is the layer that on top of the container runtime that you really care about. So, I think we'll continue to experiment in this area. I think you could possibly ask follow-up questions in Slack around it. It is sort of, if you're looking for, the one and only recommended operating system, I think we're a little more broad now. You can run RKE or K3s on any of these supported Linux operating systems. Before I move on, I want to see if Bill has anything to add to that. He's our product manager. He might have some extra color to add there. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, no worries. No, I think you did a good job covering that. That's exactly the reasons.
Okay, great. So I guess one other thing I'd hit on there is I don't want to feel like I'm avoiding the answer, but if so, what is the commitment to K3s over a SUSE variant? We're not merged yet with SUSE. The merger is still to happen in the future. So no real movement has been planned out there. We'll just have to see what develops in the future. Yeah. Any other questions to hit before I move on and basically into the demo?
I think we're good. We'll pick it up in the demo.
Cool. All right. So jumping into demo, just want to explain what you're going to see first before we get into it. These are features coming out in K3s 1.19.1. For whether you know or not, I'll restate that we mirror the upstream Kubernetes release cycle. So when Kubernetes 1.19 comes out, we come out with a K3s 1.19 shortly thereafter. We aim for 1 week, within 1 week of the upstream release. To be honest, 119 has fallen a little bit behind. We should be releasing it this week, which would put us little over a week, more like 2 weeks behind after the initial 119 release. That, just testing and some integration issues came up that pushed us back a little bit. But so yeah, we mirror Kubernetes upstream releases. Once the minor release, aka 119, is out, when a new patch release comes out, 119.2, 119.3, we tend to turn those around within a day. And so when 119 drops, some of these new features that you're going to see are embedded etcd support, configuration file support, and Helm chart config support. And so what those mean is etcd is replacing DQ Lite as the embedded HA database option. Basically, we overall think that etcd is going to be the better solution if this is the use case you want to tackle. There's just more operational experience around etcd over DQ Lite. Quite honestly, DQ Lite is fantastic technology. It's just, etcd is so well established in Kubernetes, and we're have to manage this clustered database anyway. It might as well be the one everyone knows and understands. The next thing we're going to demo is configuration file support. And so this is a change from today you have to supply all of your configuration for K3s through either environment variables or command line arguments. And those, whether you know it or not, are actually getting jammed into the system unit file or system unit environment file so that they persist across restarts, which is not the cleanest thing in the world. Configuration file supports means you can lay down a file, at etc rancher K3s config.yaml. It's well-formed YAML, and that will be picked up when you start K3s. And then finally, Helm chart config is for customizing either system or user deployments using our Helm controller functionality that's baked into K3s. Of the system components in K3s, traffic ingress controller is deployed via Helm chart. So today, if you wanted to customize traffic, you would actually have to, or our traffic ingress controller, you would actually have to disable it and then write your own deployment for it. This actually gives you basically an overlay in the form of a Helm values.yaml file. So basically, it makes it really easy to tweak your configurations without having to disable the baseline one. For user deployments, same thing. You can just have a simple Helm chart CRD that you can reuse all over the place and just change this Helm chart config CRD to customize it, across your different clusters. So that's what we're going to hit. I'll share my screen now and stop sharing my webcam as I squint at my monitor. Okay. As I squint at the monitor, you don't need to see that on camera. Okay. I'm sharing my screen now, and you should see a terminal with a browser behind it. I'll move the browser off the screen just to make it hopefully a little bit easier. I'm assuming this is large enough and everyone can see it. Bill or Hussein, you can chime in if it feels like it's too small at any point. Okay. So these three demo components, etcd, and I forgot to mention, with embedded etcd, we're also going to demo Snapshot and restores. This will be, if you lose quorum or otherwise your data gets corrupted, we're automatically taking snapshots of your etcd database, and it's super simple and straightforward to restore from those snapshots. That will be an interesting part of the demo. Now, I lost my place here. This demo is going to bring all three of these things together in sort of one continuous flow. And I did that to kind of show sort of the focus of the 119 release in general. And that is improved operations for K3s and overall improved configurability. So the theme of all three of these things are sort of taking K3s operations to the next level. And they really kind of play off each other really well. So the first thing is we're going to deploy a cluster. It's going to be backed by etcd, and we're going to use a config file to configure it rather than environment variables or command line arguments. So let's take a look at my config.yaml. So this is actually overall a very simple config.yaml, but I'll talk through what you're seeing here. Cluster init true, that is the flag that's been around since we started supporting DQ Lite. This is the flag that says, hey, I want the embedded HA database, clustered database, rather than embedded SQLite database. Node labels I've thrown in here just to kind of show how the YAML works and what you're able to do with it, how this maps very much directly to the command line arguments. Same thing with write cube config. I just wanted to show how these arguments work. These next two are related to the new etcd feature. We have a cron for scheduling your snapshots. By default, it's every 12 hours. I'm bringing it way down to 2 minutes so that I have snapshots that I can restore to. You also can control the number of snapshots retained through the etcd snapshot retention variable. And then token is just the unique thing you need to share amongst all your nodes. So that's the config file. In the good old days, this is what that would have looked like from the command line. So that's just for comparison purposes. That's super ugly, hard to read. And if you can imagine from a configuration as code or infrastructure as code perspective, you'd much rather want to be laying down config files using Terraform or your tool of choice, rather than trying to piece together all of these command line arguments. I want to pause there, see if there's any questions before I jump in.
Yeah, we have a couple. Yeah. So we're curious, there's a question whether Miguel is curious if the switching to DQ Lite versus etcd, if there's any performance or usability trade-offs that were made that would change the behavior going forward.
Right. So there's no real usability trade-offs. The UX is all exactly the same. When we did this feature supporting etcd, we basically rounded out things that we would have needed to do for DQ Lite anyway, which is really managing the database cluster. Fundamentally what that means is if a node if a K3s node that's running etcd drops, we can recognize that through the Kube API and kind of drop it out, remove it from the underlying etcd cluster. So, the real trick of what we're doing is managing that etcd cluster under the covers, and we had to do the same management for DQ Lite. Performance, I think it's effectively the same. Where you see real performance gains with K3s is when you're using SQLite, because it's not Raft, right? You're just writing to local disk, so that's obviously much more performant. Same with an external database, which is the other major external SQL database. That's the other major feature that K3s has supported forever. Those perform better than etcd, because they don't have to worry about writing across multiple nodes in the cluster. But whether it's etcd or DQ Lite, you have that same concern.
Okay. And when we ship the embedded etcd, what will the feature status be, and will there be any known caveats or critical issues?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I want to pair it with another question I saw get answered earlier, which is which is basically if it's released experimental, when will it go GA? So DQ Lite was kind of perpetually experimental, right? It had been experimental since we released it. etcd, we're going to release it with the quote unquote experimental tag initially, but that's really just, we want to get some community feedback on it, get it hardened, get it tested by the community. But the intent is for it to have a much shorter path towards officially supported, both from, we feel confident community users can use this from production, and, paying users, we're taking an SLA on it. So we expect it to be marked, GA as a feature within the 1.19 timeframe. So, you're looking at 4 weeks, give or take, based on the issues we find. Major caveats, I think, the one thing I would call out is the snapshot and restore feature out of the gate is to local disk only. So in my mind, achieving the goal with this is to achieve feature parity with RKE, right? Which is our sort of, hardened enterprise Kubernetes distribution. And it supports backing up to S3 or S3-like object stores. And so out of the gate, we're just supporting backing up to local disk. That could, of course, be, like an NFS mount if you want. But the overall goal is for that next level of functionality to be tied into K3s's integration with Rancher. So, basically as part of importing a K3s cluster into Rancher, that's where you'll get S3-based snapshot and restores, one-click upgrades, that sort of thing. And a lot of that we intend to come in the 2.6 release of Rancher. 2.5 is the one coming out in the near future. So it'll be another cycle before we get all those advanced integrations between K3s and Rancher all set. I kind of wandered a little there, Bill. Do you think I answered the question fundamentally?
I think so. I think it gives a good timeline and sets a few kind of time delineations.
Yeah.
Cool. With the etcd support, will we be losing any of the other database support, so MySQL or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely not. And in fact, this is a really important question, because this is not a fundamental mind shift for K3s. We still believe for, K3s is targeted for the edge. We still believe for the majority of those use cases, SQLite is the right data store to use, right? It's fast, it's easy, very little overhead. And then, the reason you choose either an external database or embedded etcd is because you absolutely need the HA at the database level, right? But when you're looking at an edge scenario, there's other ways to achieve sort of that disaster recovery. You use something like Fleet to redeploy all your workloads, or even advanced features and to provision a new cluster, that sort of thing. So we still think fundamentally out of the box, you're still getting SQLite as the database, and all the options that we supported before are still there. The only thing we're swapping out is if you want embedded HA database, we're switching from DQ Lite to etcd. This leads into actually sort of this is going sort of way experimental. We haven't even started this work though yet. etcd just introduced this learner feature where you can basically add a node to a cluster to a database, to an etcd cluster as a learner, and it doesn't contribute to quorum, but it's there keeping up. And what we'd like to see happen in the future is for that to turn into a hot cold database solution, where if you just have 2 nodes, you have one running etcd as sort of the hot server, and you have the second one just being a learner. And then it'll take a little operational work, but you can effectively fail over to the cold server if something happens to your hot server. That's not in 1.19. It's kind of like a theoretical idea of Darren's we haven't really proven out yet, But it's exciting because a lot of the use cases we see at the edge are, I have exactly 2 nodes, but I want HA at the database level. How can we do that?
Yeah. With the switch to etcd, is there going to be a way to migrate from like a SQLite or a MySQL to etcd, or users that were using the experimental DQLite?
Yeah, those are great questions too. So, 100% out of the gate, there's no migration. This is going to be called out very clearly in the release notes, and anywhere else we can call it out, but specifically DQLite, there is not an upgrade path. DQLite was experimental, and we kind of working through a upgrade path from DQLite to etcd would have pushed this feature out even further. So we made the tough decision to kind of make a hard cut there. Again, hopefully you can sort of you can replay your workloads in some other fashion. The migration from sort of SQLite to etcd is not there yet. I don't think we have anything even experimental, but I think that's something we ultimately will tackle. I don't have a timeline right now for that, but I think that's I think that's something we're going to have to do. And we've talked about it with Darren and Shannon. They both have talked about wanting to do that. Any others, or should I demo?
Why don't we demo for now?
Okay. Okay, going to just hit this again just to get back to where we were. This is the config file that we're going to use to launch the first node of this cluster. I talked about how ugly that would have looked as the old command. Now we can launch. So first thing I'm going to do is put this config file in place. So I'm going to make this directory etc rancher K3s. And then I'm going to copy that config YAML file that we just looked at into that directory. So K3s, it's command line arguments. You can specify an explicit path to your config file, but this ls rancher, this rancher etcd etc rancher K3s config.yaml, that's the default location. So you don't even need to add an extra parameter to say use a config file. It's just if this config file exists when you launch K3s, it'll use it. Right. So then the next thing I'm going to do is launch K3s. There's actually one more thing I want to touch on here. It wasn't an official part of the demo, but I wanted to call it out explicitly. So of course, using this get K3s.io script has sort of been the way to install K3s for a very long time. We've made some enhancements to that, specifically this channel feature. So we have multiple channels of K3s available, and it's kind of neat for testing, but well beyond testing as well. So let me make this much bigger. Bill, let me know if that's not readable. Okay, so this is the behind the scenes. This script is calling this update.k3s.io channels API. And what do we see here? It uses stable by default. So by default, if you just do sort of, a naked install using the script, you'll get 1.18.8. But we also have a latest channel. And that latest channel, the way it's configured is basically give me everything that isn't sort of like a testing release. But this testing channel explicitly does pull in testing releases, which include alphas, betas, and RC2s. So by switching to the testing channel, I'm going to get the latest RC that's out there, which is 1.19.1 RC2. The reason I wanted to call this out, this is great for internal testing, great for sort of the tinkerers and experimenters out there, but production folks can make use of this as well, because we have channels for the the minor releases of K3s and Kubernetes. So you can subscribe specifically to 1.16, 1.17, 1.18. and then when 119 comes out, 119 as well. So handy little feature if you want to protect yourself from unintentional upgrades to versions beyond what you're willing to jump to. And the way this works actually is just the link on this is just going to redirect to the GitHub release, and then the script, the install script effectively knows how to pull the artifacts from the GitHub release. All right, with that little detail out of the way, let's actually get started. So you can see it's finding the testing channel there, and this is very much just your classic K3s installation. Wait for that to start. All right, should be up and running. Let's take a quick peek at journal. Cool. Things are happening. Should be good. All right, and then just to check on things, let's get nodes here. All right, so here is this node, and you can see, typically you would not see the etcd role on it, but we started in etcd mode, so you see the etcd role. And we have, yeah, just in general, we have an up and running cluster. Let's get deployments and daemon sets just to make sure things are looking good. Right, so our deployments and daemon sets are up and running. Okay, so let's see, we launched that. Now, the next thing I want to do is sort of import this into Rancher to give sort of a visual of what's happening. So I'm going to bring back my browser. And so this is Rancher. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is just the Rancher UI. This is our enterprise product for managing multiple clusters. And you can import K3s clusters and then manage them from Rancher. So we're going to do that now. Well, I hope this is still working. I had it up and running earlier. Okay, good. So I'm creating a cluster called demo to import, and the way this works is really it just it gives you this command to run, which is going to launch the Rancher agent as a deployment inside of your cluster. So I will copy that off and run it right here. Cool. All right. So that's launching, and then we'll see this demo cluster go from pending to working. And move things around here a little bit. Okay. So while that imports, let's just check out a few things here. Click into it. You can see it's still coming up. Go over to nodes. All right, there we see our node came in, and you can see it's been recognized as a K3s cluster, and you can see it has the roles of etcd and control plane. Here's the labels that we added as part of that config file. Everything looks great. So next, let's see what's going on with the snapshots. All right, so we have one snapshot right now. If you recall, I turned up the snapshotting to every 2 minutes. So one thing I want to happen is I want to get a snapshot of this cluster in the state it is after after it's successfully imported into Rancher and those deployments for the agents are running. So while we're waiting on that, we're going to prep our other 2 nodes. And what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 more server nodes, and those are going to form those are going to be running etcd as well, and that's how we're going to have HA etcd by having three total server nodes. So I have these 2 nodes set up for that already. The config.yaml on these nodes is a little bit simpler. It just has that shared token that we saw on the other node and the URL for the server node. Okay. So let's, with that, double check. Oh, you know what I have to do? I have to make the dir on this one as well. So I'll do that. And then we'll copy our config.yaml into it. And this is my third node, so we'll do the same thing here. We'll make this dir, just to make sure we got what we need there. Yep, copy config.yaml. All right, so those are prepped. Going to come back here and see if we've gotten a second snapshot. We have. So once my cluster breaks, this is the snapshot that we're going to be restoring to. Sorry, I'm just copying it off so I don't lose it. Okay, let's bring up the other two nodes. Config's in place, so it's just a matter of running the simple install script again. You can see I have the channel as testing so that we're getting 119. And I will kick this off on both nodes. All right, things are starting to look good there. I've jumped back to the Rancher UI to show these other nodes in the cluster as they come up, and take a minute or so. All right, there's our first one. It'll show unavailable for a brief period and should jump over to active. And there's our second one. All right. Cool. You can see these ones don't have the labels because I didn't include the availability zone or the foobar label in my config file. Okay, so we have a 3-node cluster. Yay. All right. And just to show things are working, let's look at. We have our daemon sets up again. You can see the cattle system. This is the node agent daemon set, and then you can also see our deployment for the cluster agent there. That's what makes this cluster be able to talk to Rancher, those two things. All right, now we're going to break it. And breaking it's pretty easy because etcd is quorum based. We're going to cause it to lose quorum by uninstalling K3s from these two nodes. So I'm going to go ahead and this script, K3s uninstall, this is part of what you get when you install K3s. You get this uninstall script, so it knows how to clean up all the things that are left behind or that are put in place by K3s. So nothing's left behind, and you have a clean node once you run it. So it's already on my path. I will uninstall here. See, doing lots of things, and uninstall here. All right. Watching this cluster in Rancher, this is going to show up as broken because it's really not functional now because etcd is kind of freaking out. If we just even do something as simple as a get nodes. Nope. Let's check the logs. Yeah, you can see from here that we're having major problems with our database. Health checks being refused. Jump over, we can see the cluster's unavailable in Rancher. All right, so what do we do? First thing we're going to do is check the system CTL status. You can see it's not in good shape and it's trying to activate but can't. So we're going to explicitly turn off K3s to recover it. So we're going to do a system CTL stop K3s. Let's check the status again. Okay, you can see it is not active anymore. So with it completely down, what we basically need to do is restore to that good known state, which is the snapshot I had noted earlier. you'll note that when I took that snapshot, or when the snapshot was taken, there was only one node in the cluster, but the Rancher agent deployments had been successfully deployed. So if this all goes well, we'll go back to a single node, and those deployments will come back up and be functional. So let me grab the command here. Let me do the ls one more time. Okay, so we're targeting that middle snapshot because we know that's the one we took before we started breaking things. And then, so I will explain this command in a second here. Let me just grab the snapshot itself. Okay, so what are we looking at here? K3s server -- cluster reset. If you don't pass the next argument, cluster reset restore path, this is literally just a hard reset. Basically, you would be restarting down to a single node with an empty etcd database. But because we specify a restore path here, we're going to be resetting the cluster down to this node, the single node running on this, this host, using the specified snapshot. So let me kick that off. That's flying by. Okay, it exited, and this last command we have got etcd is running restart without the cluster reset flag. So this is sort of a protection. If you happen to launch K3s in such a way that, like, if you pass this command as part of the initial curl, as part of the initial curl for launching K3s, this flag would actually get set as part of the systemd unit, and so you would kind of be in a state where you'd be resetting etcd every time you restarted K3s. But we protect against that. We don't let you do that. So once you've done a reset, you basically have to make sure you're not using that flag anymore. But I did not launch it using the curl command. You know what? Sorry. I just launched it using the K3s binary directly. So this hasn't affected my overall configuration. What K3s will be started with is what's in my config file. So I should be fine just to start the service back up, which I'll do right now. Okay, that is restarted. Let's jump into the logs here, see things going by. Generally look okay. There's nothing too important for you to see here. Now let's take a look at Rancher. So already Rancher has recovered, right? Like we can already see into this cluster, which is great. This tells me, not only did we reset the cluster properly just to get something back up and running, but it did the proper restore that snapshot because it still had the workloads necessary to get K3s talking to Rancher, that daemon set and deployment I mentioned. So jumping back here, if we do kubectl get nodes, you'll see we're just back down to the single node again. What I've noticed is this should be reflected here, and it takes a minute, I think, for all the data to sync up between K3s and Rancher. So I'm going to basically wait for that just to prove that everything's getting synced up properly, and we'll see those two additional nodes drop out. To be 100% honest, I don't know why it takes so long to sync this data up. It's probably something we'll look at. Oh, there we go. The nodes dropped out. Take a look at the deployments again, and yeah, everything looks great. The cluster's back up and running in the state it was, and that was a very simple set of operations to achieve that. Let's bring HA back up. So I'm going to add these nodes back in, and once I add these back in, sort of while we're waiting for them to be pulled in, I'll pause again to see if this has generated any new questions.
We have lots of questions. They sort of ring.
Cool. Yeah, I
do you
guess
want
I
to keep
might have.
them?
Sorry?
Do you want to keep them specific to this, or do you want to just answer some general questions?
So, I kind of think I want to keep them specific to this and then do general questions afterwards, just because there is actually one more portion of the demo, and I don't want to completely lose steam on the demo itself. But yeah, I mean, if there's any kind of specific to what we saw, we could hit those now.
I think we can wait till after this next bit in your demo.
Okay, cool.
Well, sorry, Craig. So I think there is a question that I already answered, but it says, what if the first node is unreachable? Do you lose the snapshots? So I think you might clarify that all nodes might have snapshots as well, not the first node as well, only.
Right. And so Hussein is the implementer of all this functionality, along with some help from Brian as well. But he knows this better than anyone. But yeah, so snapshots are being taken on by default. It's sort of default. It's on. It's on every server node. It's every 12 hours, and by default we retain 5 snapshots. So if things go haywire, you just need to find that one good node, or that one node that you want to say, this is my source of truth. This is what I'm going to restore from. Anything to add to that, Hussein, or is that sort of the answer to the question in a nutshell?
That pretty much it. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Good question. Okay, back up to 3 healthy nodes. Everything's looking great. The last step in our journey of better configuration and operations for K3s is the Helm chart config. This is, just before I get into demoing it, I want to show it in the documentation here. Is this readable or is this too small? I'm going to assume it's readable.
It could be a little bigger.
Okay. How is that?
Much better, thank you. Cool.
So what we are talking about is this Helm chart config resource. And just, just to explain where we are, this is a top level piece of documentation in the K3s docs, is our integration with Helm. And so we sort of see Helm as, the right choice for deploying complex apps into your clusters, whether it's K3s or whatever. What we added to K3s, this has been there forever, is a Helm controller. It lets just simple declarative, lets you have simple declarative CRDs for Helm. This is a very basic one, right? It's called a Helm chart, is the name of the CRD, and this is the spec for it. It's telling this is the chart it's pulling, and just the classic stuff you would see when you're trying to deploy something using Helm wrapped into a CRD. If you're deploying user workloads using this, it has almost everything you need. You can customize the Helm chart as you see here with the values content. The problem we're looking to solve with this new feature is K3s actually deploys some things. Actually, right now it's one thing, traffic ingress controller, using this feature. But if you wanted to customize traffic, you would actually have to disable it in K3s and then create your own deployment of it. This Helm, that's just because the way K3s works in this manifest directory is anything that's bundled into K3s as part of the release, we will rewrite every time K3s restarts. So if you went in and hacked on the traffic one and then restarted K3s, we would stomp on that and you'd lose your changes. But that's only for things that, only for files in that directory that we're laying down. So you can effectively augment the existing manifest with this new feature, which is Helm chart config. And the example we give here is actually exactly what you're going to want to use it for. It's for customizing traffic itself. So that's what I'm going to demo now. So for starters, we're just going to look at sort of the current state of things. Okay, so I just got the pods and config maps out of the cube system namespace just to show what we have running. You see the traffic config map, and you see where is it here? You see traffic deployed here as well. So that's and you can see it's been up for 18 minutes. Let's take a quick look at the traffic config map really quickly. Okay, jumping back above all this managed field stuff, this is the stuff we care about, which is the actual configuration that's being pumped into traffic itself. And so this is effectively what the Helm chart writes out to traffic.toml by default. We're going to customize that to make some changes. So what changes are we going to make? Oh, I need to jump back to the node where I have this stuff. Okay, so we want to customize our traffic ingress controller deployment. We're changing the image. We're going to change it to not the Rancher mirrored one, but a slightly newer image from upstream. Turning on proxy protocol, turning on forwarded headers, and we're enabling SSL. So let's do that. It's super simple. All you have to do is drop that manifest into K3s's manifest directory. And I just, in case you're not aware, this is not specific to the the Helm chart config CRD or the Helm chart CRD. Anything you drop into this manifest directory, K3s will pick up and deploy. So, folks in edge scenarios where they want to bundle everything together, they just drop manifest in this directory and ship the device, and boom, it's there when it starts up. So I'm gonna copy this in, and it's going to get picked up automatically. So we're going to watch those resources we were looking at earlier. Okay. So just give this a second for, yeah, there we go. So you can see Helm's running. This is our Helm controller launching an instance of Helm to kick off the update. And then just a minute or two, we should see, oh, there we go. We have a new pod for traffic that's just 15 seconds old. And let's take a look at that config file again. I lost it. I'll pull it up over here. So jumping up here, you can see the changes we've made. Proxy protocol has been turned on, forwarded headers as well, and all the other changes we made, SSL, those things are all turned on in here too. So you're able to do that in a much more straightforward way than you used to be able to. And it's kind of a simple example because we just have the one Helm chart in K3s. This gives us the ability to deliver more. Oh boy, what did I copy and paste? Gives us the ability to deliver more things as Helm charts in K3s, and then also for any user workloads, we think it gives you sort of more control over how those things are deployed, because now you don't have to have many instances of the base Helm chart, right? You just have one of those, and then based on your different environments, you can seed in different Helm chart configs. So I think that will be pretty handy and useful. And just to make sure everything's up and running, yeah, everything's looking healthy. Let's take one more look at the cluster, look into the system namespace, and just check on all our workloads through the Rancher UI. Yeah, everything's looking healthy. So to summarize, what you saw today was the new features in K3s 1.19. You saw etcd, our embedded HA etcd, along with snapshot and restore functionality. You saw how you could configure K3s using a config file rather than environment variables and command line arguments. And you saw our new Helm chart config feature, which lets you provide overrides to any of the Helm chart CRDs you're currently using. That's all I had for the demo. We can jump into questions, or if Bill or Hussein, you have anything to add to it before we jump into questions, feel free.
Will there be a way to do the etcd backups in older versions of K3s, or will it only be this version moving forward?
Yeah, it's only moving forward.
Okay.
The functionality is like, it's an etcd backup. We didn't write sort of our own backup tool. It's, you know, it's at the etcd level. We're just executing etcd's baked in snapshot functionality.
Okay. And those snapshots can be taken both scheduled and ad hoc, right?
So right now it is just scheduled, and this is sort of the, so this is the feature parity with RKE. I mentioned, you know, the sort of when this is fully integrated into Rancher, you'll be able to do ad hoc snapshots out of the gate right now. It's something we went back and forth with, but we just wanted to do scheduled for now and iterate on that.
Okay. Do you know the status on K3s and RHEL CentOS V8?
I do, and the answer is it is almost there. So the big piece of work was sort of disentangling the IP tables, NF tables complexity, and we've done all that work. There's a little more QA to be had, and I think you know, part of our drive with both Cent 7 and Cent 8, Cent/RHEL 7 and 8, is making sure everything works properly with SE Linux as well. So the remaining work is some packaging work to get K3s packaged properly in RPMs. We already have RPMs, but we have some refactoring in flight. Yeah, so the remaining work is around packaging as RPMs, which plays into the SE Linux story. You kind of want to have things managed by RPMs in order to have everything copacetic with SE Linux. And then, yeah, and then a little bit of QA work as well. So expectation is not in the initial 119 release, but in a quick follow-up, you know, maybe 119, maybe like 2 to 4 weeks out is when we'll call RHEL 8 supported. But like from the things that were broken before, which is largely the IP table stuff, that should all be resolved and, you know, should be functional in our initial 119 release.
Cool. Since you're kind of touching on the installations with RPMs and tarballs and stuff, you know, maybe just kind of from the K3s side of things, is what's sort of the thought process around maybe having a Rancher initiated provisioning process for K3s clusters? Is that something we've talked? I mean, I know.
Yeah, so you can help out answer this one after I do, Bill, because I know you know it too. But we've maintained that you know, with K3s, the model doesn't make as much sense to launch those from a Rancher. This is sort of something we've talked a lot with Darren about and other stakeholders. Still see sort of the bootstrapping of K3s kind of happening outside of Rancher, and then those clusters being registered in. I think, you know, long story, we're doing it in the open. There's a repo called github.com/rancher/RKE2. It's a bit of a revamp of RKE. That's where I think we're bringing back, it'll bring together the best parts of RKE and K3s. That's where you'll see sort of a lot of our functionality moving forward too. Yeah, so that's where we're putting a good bit of effort.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, and it is something that we talk about integrating into Rancher, but it's one of the most common deployment strategies is the custom type, where Rancher is really just responsible for laying down the Kubernetes components, and that in a K3s context doesn't necessarily line up really well, but it is something, you know, we are thinking about possibly as Rancher provisions the node drivers or something along those lines, like a vSphere VM or, you know, something like that. We might be able to do something to help install and configure it that way. And again, I think, you know, there's another question that follows up on this, and I'll let Craig unpack it a little bit more. But you know, you've seen or we've talked about this in a couple different contexts of RKE2, RKE government. You know, that is, as Craig just sort of said, the kind of the next set of iterations that we're working on as far as pulling components from K3s and RKE together to come up with a new distribution that'll be, parts of it will be coming out in Rancher 2.5. So as we, you know, continue down that path, and you'll see we'll start figuring out the best way to address this bootstrapping issue. And sort of in this line, Craig, can you speak at all to what components from K3s are making it into the RKE2 Gov project?
Sure. So RKE2, which so they're synonymous names, right? Like the use case we're initially targeting is sort of government use cases, and we're putting a lot of effort into things specific to that area around compliance and encryption security. It's called FIPS, or, you know, encryption compliance, FIPS 140-2, and a lot of other, you know, just compliance and security related stuff. So, but what are we taking from K3s? The biggest take is the UX. Everything I demoed here today, for the most part, if you replaced, you know, K3s with RKE2, you'd have a feel for the K3x usability, or sorry, the RKE2 UX, and the deployment strategy, which, you know, I kind of associate with the UX, where you're launching server nodes and agent nodes, and you're doing it by launching a supervisor process on the node, and then it's assuming that role in the cluster. That's sort of the 10,000 foot view of what it's borrowing from K3s. And I mean, it's really built on the same code base. Like, we're pulling forward sort of the chassis that is K3s. What's different about it, or why it's important, is, you know, K3s it's optimized for the edge. It's optimized for you know, small nodes, small number of nodes, and we've made a lot of things that make it at least feel or be perceived as not 100% upstream Kubernetes. Now, it functions very much like an upstream Kubernetes cluster, but again, for compliance reasons, or just for, like, you know, from the CTO down, you want to have sort of just vanilla upstream Kubernetes. That is fundamental and core to RKE2. And so what we're doing is we're taking away sort of some of those optimizations for the edge. All the control plane components, like the API server, controller manager, scheduler, in K3s, those are all run inside of a single process, and that really cuts down on memory. In RKE2 and as well in RKE1, you know, they'll be run as separate containers. In RKE1, there's a requirement on Docker to run those separate containers, right? Docker launches the API server as a container. In RKE2, they're Kubernetes static pods. So you know, it's kind of like, if you think about it as sort of like a, you know, a layered cake. At the bottom layer is the RKE supervisor. It then launches containerd and the kubelet. And inside of the kubelet, or, you know, the kubelet is looking at a static pods folder, and in there we're deploying etcd, and then the other components, like API server, controller manager. So you sort of get supervisor, kubelet, and then etcd and containerd, and then we build Kubernetes on top of that. And so it looks like a very traditional Kubernetes control plane deployment. There's no magic or mystery, as there sometimes can be with K3s. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I think it was a good overview of sort of what's differing or what's different between the two. And so then I think another good question that sort of ties into this is, when would someone decide to use, and I think you sort of touched on this, so maybe just elaborate a little bit in this direction. When would you choose between like an RKE and a K3s distro? Like what scenarios, would you lean one way or the other?
Yeah, and like you said, I think we've hit on a few times, and K3s really is it definitely can be run. It can run big clusters. We've pushed the bounds of K3s. We've run the upstream Kubernetes scale test, and K3s has done very well there. But it really is optimized for those edge use cases. RK1 as it is now and fully deeply integrated into Rancher. You're going to have like a fuller feature set in Rancher as it exists today. You have, that UI integration for snapshot restores and backups. You have, full-fledged, you can template out your clusters in the UI and everything like that. And so there's deeper integrations there. And, that's where we will take RKE as a brand will always represent that. It's sort of the full-fledged clusters that you deploy and integrate and are integrated deeply with Rancher. Anything to add there, Bill?
No, I think that's fantastic. That was a great response. Did have a question from another user asking if we've considered, the tools that we've packaged in particular around ingress. Have we considered changing traffic or or for something else? Or what's sort of our take on K3s and the components that are shipped with it?
Yeah. So not only did we consider changing traffic, we actually changed it briefly, and we sort of realized from the community response that the use of traffic was very much people like traffic and wanted to keep it there. So it was sort of like we know sort of internally we know. Oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on the name. What is the one we use everywhere else?
Nginx.
Nginx. We use Nginx ingress everywhere else. The traffic has a lot of adoption and a lot of understanding in the K3s community, so we're going to stick with it. I think the big thing we want to do there, and it should be on our roadmap, is bump up to traffic 2, because we're not there, we're not on it yet. And so the move to traffic 2 is the one we definitely need and want to make. With the thing that we've always said about K3s is we bundle in all these components, but you can bring your own, right? So containerd will, that'll be our container runtime of choice that we bundle in, where we have good relationship with that community and pretty good operational experience in it. So we'll stick with that. Same with Flannel. Flannel's an interesting one, right? Because it's not sort of like the most vibrant, like huge community projects, but it just works. And specifically for these like simple networking use cases that you see on the edge, it's a simple solution that you never run into problems with. But there's a lot of exciting innovation in the CNI space, Cilium, Maltus, things like that. So while I don't think we've made any explicit decisions there, and we still like invest in Flannel, and we are contributing to Flannel to get the things we want there, I could see that being an area that evolves over time as sort of the industry and community evolves around what's best, what's simplest. I think the thing we like to avoid the most with networking is just unnecessary complexity, and that's why we've loved Flannel for so long. Just simple works.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, I think with K3s, it is, out of the box designed and optimized for that edge use case without any customizations really required, and it should address most use cases, but it's also a fully compliant distribution of Kubernetes. And so if you want, with a simple flag, you can disable any component that we ship. You do not need to use anything that is shipped as part of K3s. So what's really nice is if you do want to use Cilium, you just disable Flannel and follow the upstream instructions for installing Cilium, and you have it up and running, and it should just work. And if it didn't, if there's a bug or something, up until the point where CNI or some integration point with those things, that's a bug on. We view that as a bug on our part, and work very quickly to address those things. So like I said, it's a full-fledged distro, and we work really hard to make sure that everything we do does not get in the way of the community from adopting other projects or using other tools in the ecosystem. We really want this just to be a building block that's really easy for people to continue to consume and build upon.
Yep, well said.
I think that's the questions. I think we covered all the questions that we've got so far.
Well, shall I sort of wind up a little bit then, and if anybody come in whilst I'm talking, then we can answer those.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this up there for a while. What next? Calls to action. What do I do now? For those of you still on, there's still plenty of you actually. Just a reminder, YouTube channel. I think there was a question earlier on about what's the YouTube channel. Just go onto YouTube and search for Rancher Labs. It will come to the top of the list. I don't think there's a friendly URL. Next thing you should do, sign up for the free conference. If you're coming to this online meetup about K3s, you should be interested in computing on the edge of Kubernetes conference. It's happening on October the 21st. It's free. Sign up. If you want to present, the call for papers stuff is the deadline's on Friday this week, so get your submissions in sharpish. Free certification. Honestly, this is like, if you're into this stuff and you haven't done the certification, you're really missing out. It's fun, it's valuable. You can show off your certificate to all your mates on LinkedIn for what it's worth, but it is a genuinely valuable certificate you don't have to pay a penny for. There is no excuse. It's self-learning, so self-paced, lots of video interaction, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, whilst the other two things are free, unfortunately with a daily coffee, that's not, because it's virtual, so bring your own. Coffee and Cloud Native, run by Adrian Goins, who's our Director of Community. It's actually off his own channel, so he kind of says what he wants to, it's all the better for that. It's on daily, it's about half an hour, 45 minutes. He's super knowledgeable, great delivery, lots of interaction. I would highly recommend it. And lastly, we've all got really super simple email addresses. If you want to reach out to us, it's Craig at, Bill at, Tom at, and Hussein at rancher.com. We're very happy to hear from anybody who attends these sessions. If you have any further questions or want to be connected with anybody in the business or in the community for that matter, and let me or Craig or Bill or Hussein know. And that's about it. Any last comments, guys?
Nope, just thank you.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.